So my question is, what are you going to do to overhaul CSC, Corrections Services Canada?
Well, first of all, let's get rid of retrograde legislation. So we just had a government who, notwithstanding that all the evidence is showing that crime is going down, they bring in law that would respond to crime being a major problem that you should all be staying up late at night to be fearful of, and then bringing in laws that force other levels of government to have to respond accordingly. And then, you know, the whole system will be based on incarceration. And so, you know, what does that do? The present system, it says, first of all, that there's a big tsunami about to happen, and you're going to get deluged. And not looking at what we should be looking at in our criminal justice system, and is what is the goal, and where is the justice? And here's something that I think we need to focus on as social democrats, is that when you talk, and this is what the government has been using and manipulating for purposes of their agenda, is using victims, the language of victims. When you actually talk to people who have been victims of serious crime, they don't want revenge, they want justice. And that part is something I think we need to out this government on. Where is the justice in their crime legislation, and where is the justice in the institutions that we have now, and letting these programs wither on the vine, and not looking at what the goals of our correctional system should be. And that is to take people and work with them to try and rehabilitate so that people can reform themselves and be able to live productive lives when they get out. We've gone back to the 1800s in terms of our thinking and the legislation we've seen and the mentality. The deepest concern I have is the mentality of the people who are in positions of leadership. It's about punishment, and it's about not about justice. And that permeates all the way down. When you have leadership like that, it's noticed. And so instead of saying, okay, how do we deal with very complex issues? I mean, if you go to any of our institutions and you look at who's there and why they're there, it is complicated. But there's a number of things you can notice. And what I will notice is that disproportionately our First Nations are overrepresented.
Yes.
And same goes when you go south of the border with African American population. Why is that? Well, geez, let's look at that. Let's look at poverty. Let's look at, access to education. We've just been talking about Attawapiskat. I mean, these things have profound effects on populations. And when we just simply say, oh, well, we'll just build more prisons and everything will be fine, we need to speak up and speak out. So no, what I would do is, first of all, rescind the legislation they just passed,
right,
because it's nuts. Secondly, is to reform our system so it actually looks at justice and looks at helping people and prevent, obviously, the situation from happening in the beginning. And we know how to do that. There are all sorts of models right across this country on how to invest in communities to prevent some of the crime that is happening, and there is some, that is based on crushing poverty, lack of opportunity, mental health, lack of opportunity in education, addictions. I could go on, and we all know what the issues are. So it seems to me we have a collective responsibility to do something about it. And that's what I would do, is start dealing with the actual problem instead of ones that are made up.
Right. Well, the one thing I've noticed in regards to Dorchester, because I volunteer Dorchester and Westmoreland, that the amount of people that are going in that are 19 years old. And if you look at, what Stephen Harper's doing, you put somebody in that's 19 years old, you keep them in prison until like 65 or whatever. They haven't contributed to the community at all.
Yeah.
And once they reach that age, and say if they do get out, and you get old age, there's basically, how do you take care of that person?
No, it's entirely retrograde, regressive, but the problem, and here's the problem. Let's be honest about the problem. The problem is how this is wedged and how it's communicated. So we all have friends we talk to, and you know, they hear the message, and it's the dog whistle, I call it, about you have to be worried about crime. It's the fear factor. And so you create a problem that doesn't exist, and people are fearful, so they say, yeah, we do have to deal with crime, even though the crime hasn't increased. But they hear stories, and you know, the government's constantly saying that there is a problem, and then they come in with their solution. We're going to crack down on crime, and we're going to have mandatory minimums, and it's going to be, you know, a pleasant world after that, as if life were so simple. And this is what we have to take on and say, you know what, this is not the case. It's just factually not the case. And this is going to cost money that we could be investing in people.
Yes.
And so it's going to fail. And show that this is a government that is reckless. I mean, this is reckless. And we need to start using that language, because it is. I mean, making the choices between investing in prisons and F-35 jets versus investing in communities and affordable housing and in people. It's reckless what they're doing, and call it what it is. We have to take this on, because it is very effective, you know, the communications and the way they do things. But it requires all of us standing up and speaking out, and providing a very straightforward critique on it, and showing there's another way of doing things.
I got two questions. One's a good question, one's a bad question. Like not a bad question, but a lame question. You're saying a lot about you want to build the grassroots and build the party and things like that. You know, in Atlantic Canada, I feel like New Democrat values are really Atlantic Canadian values. We have a NDP government in my home province of Nova Scotia. That's really good. How do we like build the grassroots in Atlantic Canada? How do we like reform it, like, you know, riding associations, get them more effective and have a more effective party and have more people involved?
We have to have organizers on the ground. We don't right now federally. We had up until May 2nd, and then after the election, they were pulled in, so to speak, and some of that was just to help deal with the growth in our caucus in Ottawa, and that's fine. But no, we need to put people on the ground right now. And this isn't about waiting for another 6 months or a year. This is right now, and we have to have a youth organizer. I'm very excited across the country about, you know, around youth and who are organizing on their own, and sometimes changing the model that we have. It's not just about campus clubs. They're organizing young New Democrats in areas, and I want to build that up and support it. Conservatives, as I said in my opening, Conservatives have been organizing the grassroots. Let's acknowledge that. They've done a darn good job. So they have, you know, the constant messaging that comes out. They phone in to the phone line, to the open line shows. They write in to the newspaper. Their message is getting out. So what we need to do is the same thing by having people on the ground. But most importantly, and that's why it's important that, you know, does everyone know everyone here? I mean, some of you know each other, not everyone. We need to do this, right? And say, okay, let's go out and connect with people in your neighborhood. And let's have campaigns on issues, right? So that we're connecting ourselves with issues on the ground in communities. And so talk about, you know, if there's a fight in our local community that needs to be taken on, we find common cause on that and work together with people on the ground and really push at the local level issues so that people understand where we stand, and it's with them. And that will then build up databases, right? And bring in more people that we can connect with when a campaign does come. But it starts with having organizers who will make sure we have working executives, fundraising plans, search committees for candidates, and that we are then going to have all that put in place long before an election comes. And then, as I said, doing issue-based campaigning. Conservatives do issue-based campaigning all the time. They raise a lot of money with it, you might have noticed, on things like long gun registry, or things like the crime bill, or even CBC. It's one of their biggest, when they talk about need to take it to CBC, that's a big fundraiser for them. Well, we need to do the same thing, but talk about propositions about, you know, having the CBC, about having healthcare, about you know, having environmental oversight that's sane, and showing that, you know, we're the party that on issues, and for me, very personally, on having an enlightened foreign policy. And I think we have to talk more about that with Canadians as well.
All right.
The second one.
It's
Yeah, the second one.
it's a
Go
quick
ahead.
one,
No,
it's a
no.
quick one. It's third weekend in November.
Yeah.
Leader of the opposition or Prime Minister, whoever it be.
Yeah.
Would you be at a Grey Cup game?
I have to say I would. Because I'm sorry. I do. I love football. I grew up.
Rough Rider fan?
Yeah. We don't have a team.
Not anymore. Coming soon.
No, it was my mother made me do it. My dad was a football fan, but my mother was a big Ottawa Riders fan and used to go to games with her. So I'd be there for sure.
In that case, you have to bring me with you.
Yes, okay, I will. It's a date. I like it.
Sounds good.
I was going to say, just a quick point. That's not my real question. I would say with that response, you would have my son's vote. Anyways, what I really want to know is how do you see turning around the erosion? And what I see is a really quick erosion of our healthcare system, which to me, I mean, I'm old enough to remember